After a very long time, I finally made it back up here to the Galilee, and today I'm going to show you some churches and archaeological sites that have a connection to Jesus. There is so much to see, and I'm going to be talking briefly about a lot of different sites. But before I do, there is a bit of important background to discuss. The Sea of Galilee and the sites around it are all connected to the most important years in Jesus' life. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, grew up in Nazareth, and was crucified in Jerusalem. But most of the chapters in the four Gospels of the New Testament are about his time here. The ministry of Jesus, his teaching and his miracles occurred in this region. Of the 12 disciples, 11 came from here. The only one who didn't come from here was Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed him. As a tour guide who has come here and to Jerusalem dozens of times, I will say that in my experience, it is here in the Galilee rather than in Jerusalem that believers find a way to feel closer to Jesus. Jerusalem can be too much, too intense, too full, too noisy, and it is here with the beautiful views and peaceful atmosphere that believers find a way to connect. The first place I want to show you is the only site that is not directly situated on the water, but on a mountain close by, the Mount of Beatitudes. This place, this church, is dedicated to the Sermon on the Mount, perhaps the most well-known of Jesus' teachings. The site is laid out perfectly. First, you go through a garden with views of the Galilee. In the gardens are the verses of the Beatitudes. The church itself is unique. It is different from most churches that were built in Israel. One of the principles you will find all over Israel is that new churches are built on top of the old ones. The modern church is built on top of the Crusaders' church, which in turn was built on top of the Byzantine church. Soon you will be seeing some example of that. Here it is different. Antonio Barluzzi, the Italian architect who designed this church, knew that the ruins of the historical church are on a lower part of the mountain, next to the road. But unlike other churches that are said to be located on the exact stone where the miracle happened, here it is not about a specific rock, but about the words, about what was being taught. To emphasize the words, Barluzzi built the church higher up on the mountain. The church has an octagonal form, which tends to focus the visitor's attention to the middle. But here the emphasis is not a spot in the center, but rather the opposite. This is, as far as I know, the only church in Israel that has high-height windows all around it, as if to say that the important thing here isn't the exact location of where the event took place, but rather the influence of Jesus' words on the world. The next place I want to show you is Capernaum, the best known and most visited site here. There is a lot to see, and my next video will be entirely dedicated to Capernaum, but I can't do a video about Jesus in the Galilee and not show at least a glimpse of Capernaum. This is where Jesus lived during most of his ministry. Today the site is run by the Franciscans. There is a lot to see, but the first thing that catches the eye is the church that looks like a spaceship. It hovers over an archaeological compound, and as I said, like many octagonal churches, the focus is on the middle of the structure. Beneath the glass window is a room that has been identified as the house of Peter, where Jesus lived. This place is called Sacra Insula, the Holy Building. This can be considered one of the first places that the followers of Jesus gathered in. A church once stood here in the 4th century, and a modern church was built on top of it without ruining or adding to the original structure. Not far from here is the synagogue, and a very impressive one it is too. The one we can see here is from the 5th century, but it has been built on top of a synagogue dating from the 1st century, which is the synagogue where Jesus preached and performed a miracle. Did Jews who believed in Jesus live alongside Jews who didn't see him as a Messiah? Was the big synagogue from the 5th century an attempt to show how strong the Jewish community was in the place where Jesus had lived? Jesus cursed Capernaum for not acknowledging him as a Messiah, and the synagogue may be a reference to that. The city was eventually destroyed in 749 in one of the most destructive earthquakes to occur in the land of Israel. Next to the Franciscan compound is a nice church that belongs to the Orthodox Church. There are two other places that Jesus cursed, which are also in this region. The first is Beit Zida. It is part of a national park. This is where the apostles Peter, Andrew, and Philip came from, and where Jesus healed a blind man. Another place that Jesus cursed is called Corazim or Corazim, which today is an archaeological site with the ruins of a very impressive synagogue. In two of the Gospels, Matthew and Luke, it is written that these places were part of the ministry of Jesus, but they rejected his teaching and didn't change their ways. Next to Capernaum are two more important sites. The first is the Church of the Primacy of Peter. One of the things I like about this place is that, like in Capernaum, there is access to the water of the Sea of Galilee. There is a lot to see in this area, and visiting so many places is not always easy, but the water has a really calming effect on people. As a guide, I would much rather give people the chance to go down to the water, even if it means having to skip a site. The site commemorates a few different events. This is where Jesus appeared after the resurrection. The bedrock inside the church is called Mensa Christi, the table of Christ, where Jesus laid out bread and fish for the apostles and told Peter 3 times to feed my sheep. This part of the coast is called Tabcha or Heptapegon, which means 7 springs, and indeed this area was rich in fish, with water and boats being common motifs in the New Testament. This is where you will also find the Church of the Multiplication, the miracle in which Jesus fed 5,000 people with only 5 loaves and 2 fish. This is the only miracle that is mentioned in all 4 Gospels. You will notice that the church has a very nice mosaic floor. Another site I want to show you is located in the premises of a new hotel. It is called Magdala. Magdala was the Jewish town that Mary Magdalene came from. Her role in the New Testament is interesting, and it is also interesting to see how the church has treated her character throughout the generations. As they were digging here, they found the foundation of a synagogue from the 1st century. Jesus probably visited this synagogue. Now, this hotel where the synagogue is located is absolutely gorgeous. I will leave a link to it below. It is a new hotel that's located right on the water. I plan to make a video about recommended accommodation around the Sea of Galilee, but until I do, a quick word about it, as this is, after all, a travel channel. My first tip is to stay for at least 2 nights. You can technically see quite a lot in a day, but this is such a nice area that you should book for at least 2 nights. Try to come here between Sunday and Thursdays. On Fridays and Saturdays, the Israeli weekend, there is a lot of traffic and most places are full. You will probably be coming here from Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, the big cities. I would recommend the countryside rather than staying in another city. This is the most diplomatic way I can say it, but if you can, skip Tiberias. There is a good hostel there, Tiberias Hostel. If you're traveling on a budget, it's a great option. And there is the Scottish Hotel, which is a very special hotel. But other than that, I would recommend accommodations that are next to the water. I will list my recommendations below the video. The next place I want to show you is Kursi. Today it is a national park. There is a Byzantine monastery from the 5th century. This is where Jesus performed the miracle of the swine. Jesus exorcised demons out of a man and turned them into a herd of swine. Kursi gets far fewer visitors than the other sites that I have shown you, and many people haven't even heard about this miracle. The reason I want to show you this place is not necessarily because of the significance of the miracle, but because of its location. All the important sites I've shown you, Capernaum, Tabcha, Magdala, are on the western side of the Sea of Galilee, on the Galilee side of the Sea of Galilee. Kursi is on the other side, the Golan Heights side of the Sea of Galilee. These two sides were ruled by two different rulers and had different populations. The western side was populated mostly by Jews and was ruled by Herod Antipas, and the eastern side was populated mostly by non-Jews and was ruled by Philippus. Jesus performed this miracle in Kursi, which is on the eastern side, so it makes sense that they had pigs over there. Most of the people in the Western world have heard about these places, Jerusalem, Nazareth, and the Jordan River, but they are only abstract names. It isn't until you visit Israel that you really begin to understand the story of the New Testament in their geographical context, and everything makes more sense. The miracle with the swine could only have taken place in a non-Jewish village. Here is another example. The Apostle Matthew was a tax collector. This makes sense because Capernaum was located close to the border between the two kingdoms. Jesus, as a Jew who preached to Jews, lived in the Galilee but made sure to stay close to the border because Herod Antipas was persecuting him. You can't really understand the New Testament without understanding Jewish society and the history of the land of Israel in the 1st century. When visiting Israel, you get to directly connect the story you have heard to the land, which allows for a much deeper and richer understanding of the Bible. There is, however, something more important for pilgrims than understanding the Bible, and I will talk about that at the next site. The last site I want to share with you is Yardenit, on the southern part of the Sea of Galilee. This is the baptismal site located on the Jordan River. Now, if you follow me, you are probably thinking, wait a minute. In a video you made a few weeks ago, you said that the baptismal site was at Qasr el-Yahud, not far from the Dead Sea. How come there are two sites? First, I will say that it is very common to have two sites commemorating the same event. There are two Last Supper rooms, two graves said to be that of Jesus, two churches of the Annunciation in Nazareth. And once you get into the details, it does make sense. So what is the story here? The historical site is Qasr el-Yahud. That's a place that pilgrims visited for hundreds of years and where there are many churches, mostly belonging to the Eastern Church or the Orthodox Church. Qasr el-Yahud is right on the border between Israel and Jordan, and until 2011 it was closed to the public. Another factor is that Israel has dammed up the water of the Jordan River, so the water that does flow in Qasr el-Yahud comes from small rivers, and it is not necessarily clean. Here you can be baptized in the clean waters of the Jordan River. I could go deeper into it, but the truth is that it isn't that important. The personal experience that people have here is the most important thing. Meeting people who watch my channel and hearing that my videos help them plan their trip to Israel is a great joy. I met Lisa and Margaret, and getting to hear some compliments from them wasn't too bad either. I had the honor of meeting another two of my channel followers, Andy and Lynette. I met them in Capernaum and then again at Peter's Primacy and then here. They came here to be baptized in the Jordan River, and being with them as they celebrated such an important personal event was a very emotional experience. This is the reason why I do what I do. I don't want to end this video on an overly emotional note, so I will now ask you to give this video a like and to subscribe to my channel. If you have any questions about the sites around the Sea of Galilee, please write them below. Next week I will probably be working on my video about Capernaum, so if you do have any specific inquiries about Capernaum, I will try to answer them in the video. Before I drove back to the desert, I stopped for a quick swim in the Jordan River. A great way to finish a beautiful, meaningful day. See you next week. Yalla bye.